On this episode of Game Shack, I'm going to talk about the rumored Pro line from Arcade1up, and I'm going to predict maybe what is going to be in that Pro line, what I personally would like to see it, and I'm going to ask you guys what you want out of a new Pro line from Arcade1up. All that and more coming up next. Hey everybody, it's JDV here for EvilGeniusEntertainment.com. Welcome back into the Game Shack, the world's smallest arcade. The year 2021 is wrapping up, I think, in 9 days as I record this, so Christmas is only a few days away. And I got to thinking, what is Arcade1up's Pro line going to look like if it's real? What do I want it to be? What do you guys want it to be? And what is it actually going to be? Well, the first thing is you can bet that it's going to be expensive. If you look at games like Tron, Killer Instinct, Terminator, Simpsons, those are all going for $700, although we are seeing price reductions in at least Simpsons that you can go into Walmart. I think you can get that for as low as $550. I think I've seen it at Walmart if you go and pick it up yourself. So we are starting to see the prices come down on the Simpsons. I'll talk a little bit about why that might be coming up. But what exactly would a professional lineup look like, and what could it really possibly look at? Well, the first thing I think that Arcade1up really would have to do if they start charging premium prices for more than $700, which is already a fairly premium price, seeing as that you can buy used Galaga machines and Centipedes machines for like $600 or $700 off of Craigslist and Facebook. If you look around hard enough, you will be able to find working machines for that price. Now, they might be a little bit beat up, but they'll have the cab, they'll have the coin door, they'll have the screen, they'll obviously have the original art. So figure that they can't charge much more than $1,000, maybe $1,500 for this. And one of the primary things that I would like to see fixed if they do start charging $1,000, $1,500, even $2,000 is quality control to be improved. The quality control of Arcade1up has always been a little up and down. Some people have great experiences with their machines right out of the box. Others have, chip control decks, washed out marquees, most famously for the class of '81, and other things that make it less than optimal right out of the box, either because it got damaged in the factory or on the way, or design defects like that washed out marquee in the class of '81. Regardless, if you're going to be paying $1,000 for what is essentially a toy, and even real arcade machines are really just toys unless you're using them to actually make money in a business, then you want that toy to be as nice and as mint as humanly possible. And right now, that would mean a significant change, I think, in the way that Arcade1up is doing its quality control over in China. I've just saw a video last night on the new Tron game where the guy's spinner did not work at all. Now, to be fair, that seems to be a minority type problem, but realistically, for a brand new product costing that much money, you don't want to see anything wrong with it. You want that thing to work perfectly out of the box. No scratches, no washed out marquees, all the controllers working, everything sounding and working the way it should. Look at Speakergate. They kind of went cheap or got a different manufacturer on that, and that has not proven to be good. So first things first, get the quality control right. So whatever it is that we see in the ads, let's make sure we actually see that in the home. I think probably the most obvious thing that you would want to see in a professional machine are bigger cabs that more closely resemble the original cabinets. Now, we're already seeing this, of course, with Tron, Simpsons, Killer Instincts. We're seeing the cabs that look more and more closely exactly like their original arcade counterparts. But one thing, of course, that they are not is wider. Even the taller games like Street Fighter Big Blue and Tron still have that same 17-inch monitor. They still have that same relatively small, I think, 19-inch control deck. A 17 inches, I think, is just fine for games like Pac-Man and Galaga on this 3/4 scale, but maybe isn't as nice if you're actually expanding that machine out. It's certainly not good enough for games like Buck Hunter, where you have to stand a certain distance away. I mean, really, even 20 inches is too small for a game like that. It's just way too small for horizontal side-scrolling beat-em-ups or horizontal fighting games, and I would hope that, other than expanding the size of the controller deck, that we would see larger monitors. Now, the monitors that they are using right now in the 17-inch versions are quite adequate. They look pretty dang good if you're being honest about it. but they're just too small for some applications. So obviously, if you're going to have a bigger cabinet, you want to see a bigger control deck and you want to see a bigger monitor. Now, whether or not we're going to see that, who knows? Would you still be interested in a larger cab, an actual, the physical box of it, so to speak, being bigger, but the 17-inch monitor? Again, it might work for something like Galaga or Pac-Man, but it just is not going to work for something like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. So I'd say the sound is actually pretty good in a lot of these Arcade1up games, the speaker gate of this last generation kind of being accepted. Heck, the sound even in those little tabletop games is pretty good. Because the fact is, if we're being honest, it's not like you're playing the newest version of Halo or something like that in these games. Most of the sound from these original arcade games was mono and wasn't that great to start with. There's a big difference, say, between the sound effects coming out of a 1978 pinball machine and a 2020 pinball machine, right? So I think the speaker size and quality really is going to be dependent upon the game. But part of what I think most of us would like to see out of these new cabs aren't just larger versions of Pac-Man, aren't just larger versions of Galaga or whatever, but we want to see newer titles. And this Killer Instinct is really the first toe in the water, tentative step in that direction. Now, what about coin doors? And I'm not talking about the plastic pre-printed out doors that you can get from Arcade1up on a few of their machines. Obviously, that would be a good starting point to make sure that at least that had those three-dimensional plastic doors on all there. But if I'm paying $1,500 for a machine or $1,000, I want to have real steel coin doors. I want light up coin slots, and yeah, I want those coin doors to work. In other words, I want people to have to put quarters in the machine to start the game, even if it's rigged just so the quarter comes right back down the slot. If we're paying that kind of money, why not have working coin doors? And before you think that's too crazy of an idea, you can buy working coin doors right now off of Amazon, I think for $50 or $60. So imagine that mass produced, upscale that in the kind of thing that Arcade1up can do, and the relative cost of having a working coin door really isn't that expensive. And boy howdy, would that make something truly professional, because then if you really did want to try to make money out of it, say if you owned a convenience store, a grocery store, if you want to start your own little kind of neighborhood arcade, it sure would make it a lot easier if you had a working coin door. So yeah, I hope that if we're seeing prices at $1,000 or more, that it has a real working coin door. So beyond the size of the controller deck hopefully being bigger, is the layout of these controls are going to be directly tied to how many titles are on this cab. Now, one of the things that we saw that was good in 2021 is the 12-in-1 kind of multi-cade approach, which I personally love. However, when you do that, you do tend to limit what kind of games you can have on there. Now, a whole bunch of Street Fighter type games use the Street Fighter layout. Heck, I mean, you can even really play Mortal Kombat using that layout. It's not such a unique thing. But a game like Paperboy, how many other games are you going to be able to put on that cab? And you can see even in a game like The Simpsons, where just the addition of that little trackball really did mess up Homer's position on there, where you have those buttons being really cramped in a very odd spot. Some people are going to want to have just one game on each of these cabs, essentially just slightly smaller, maybe not quite as deep games, essentially straight up reproductions of the original cabs with one, maybe two games if it was came out like that. Now personally, I would rather still see the 12-in-1. I mean, I really don't want to pay $2,000 or $1,500 for one game, and yet that is where the trend has been going from Arcade1up. If you look at the $700 games, the most recent gen games, Terminator has one game, Simpsons has 2 games, Tron has 2 games, and I think Killer Instinct has, I'm probably wrong, but I think they have 5 games on that cab, and that's the most games of those new cabinets. Also, of course, if you're a fan of one game that's not the star of that cab, say like Defender, we're seeing that where Defender gets its own cab but doesn't get the original control deck, you know, that's going to make diehard fans of certain games upset. So I do think that Arcade1up is in something of a quandary here in terms of the theory behind the product. Like, is the game aimed at being essentially perfect reproductions of these arcade games, maybe just a little smaller, but bigger than the 17 inches and 4-foot high versions that we have now? Or are they essentially bigger versions of what we do have now? So in other words, you have either exact arcade replications in one hand and bigger Arcade1up versions of those games in another. So sort of grown-up versions of what they already have, or exact reproductions of original games. But of course, the biggest game that they sell is Miss Pac-Man and Pac-Man. And do you really need to have an original full-size Pac-Man cab in your house? I don't know. And also, you can find those games that are in pretty good shape for $1,500 if you look around. So I'm not sure where the market is going to be in something like that if it doesn't have the multi-cade type approach in it. Well, let me know what you guys think in terms of what you would like to see in a Pro Line, what price you'd be willing to pay to have, let's say, an exact reproduction of a game that you love from your childhood. And I guess if you think Arcade1up is going to do this at all. All right, if you like this sort of content, if you like this video, give me a thumbs up on the way out the door. It does help us. Please like and subscribe, hit the notification bell, and all that other good jazz. Have a Merry Christmas, and hopefully I'll have a video up before New Year, but if I don't have a Happy New Year, love each other, and until next time, I'll see you guys in the Game Shack. Mwah!
Be sure to visit evilgeniusentertainment.com for exclusive content, swag, casting call news, and much, much more.